Hello YouTube, today we're going to be doing some econ practice problems, specifically just some multiple choice practice. We'll be talking about cost curves, perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition, and the first problem will start off with a little bit of game theory and a payoff matrix. So we'll just jump into some problems here. So we got Home Depot and Ace Hardware, and they want to see if they want to raise or lower their prices. So I color-coded Ace Hardware with green and Home Depot in blue. Pretend this is like in millions of dollars of profit or something. So to look at something like this, you kind of have to compare the choices and what you can make. So if Ace Hardware raises their prices and Home Depot raises their prices, they'll have a profit. Ace will have a profit of 7 million and Home Depot will have a profit of 9. So this is kind of saying what choice is going to happen based off this matrix here. So let's look at the first question. It says, according to this payoff matrix, all the choices are talking about dominant strategies. So to figure out a dominant strategy, you look at each choice here. So for Ace Hardware, look at just the green. If they choose to raise their prices or a high price, then notice how compared to the low, they'll be making more money. 6 is greater than 7. 4 is greater than, or 5 is greater than, wow, I just said something wrong, I think. 7 is greater than 6, and 5 is greater than 4. So since 5 and 7 are both larger than the previous options for lowering their price, that means it is a dominant strategy to have high price. Dominant means like it's better. What is dominated in the verb past tense is what you don't want, is these choices here. So no matter what, Ace Hardware is going to probably raise their prices or have a high price. Again, this is dominated. Remember, you don't want to be dominated, you want to be dominant. So this is a dominant strategy for Ace Hardware, and this is a dominated strategy. So then we move on to Home Depot. So we definitely know that at least one firm has it, so it could be C at this point. So now let's look at Home Depot. Well, let's see, if Home Depot, so now we're looking at the blue. If Home Depot chooses to raise their price for higher prices, notice the 9 and 7 here. Now it's kind of hard to see, but 9 compared to 7, oh wait, excuse me, we gotta go this way. So since 11 is bigger than 9, that means they're probably not going to, but that it's both bigger than 9 and 7, that it's going to be, they're not going to choose this option as well because they'll make more money here. So pretty much they both have a dominant strategy. It's better for Home Depot to have lower prices because both 9 and 11 are bigger than this 9 and 7 here for those choices. So now that we've seen that, that means both strategies actually, both firms have a dominant strategy, so that is the first answer choice here. So according to the payoff matrix, we would expect what? Well, we're going to expect there to be high prices for Ace and low prices for Home Depot. So that would be choice D. And then, according to the payoff matrix, the equilibrium, Home Depot earns what? So equilibrium, this is the Nash equilibrium as it's called, if you're familiar. It's just what the outcome is going to be for what each company chooses to do. So we look at Home Depot, and that is in blue, so that means their profit is 11 million. So now it's done with the payoff matrix. Let's get into this other stuff here. So suppose a perfectly competitive firm is producing 2,000 units of output and has total revenues of 100,000. So let's look at that. So total revenue is price times quantity. We're given the quantity here, so we have 2,000 times the price, and that equals the total revenue, which is given to be $100,000. So that means our price has to be $50. So we put it on the graph here. I always like to show a graph. And we have this here. Now this is for a firm, and remember in perfect competition, the demand for the firm is elastic. So we'll draw that. Here's the demand for the firm. So now we got to see in the long run equilibrium what is true. Well, the marginal cost is $50. That is given here. We figured that out. It's not given. We actually had to figure that out. So that's true. The minimum average cost is $50. Well, let's look at this. We're in long run equilibrium. What's true about long-run equilibrium for a perfectly competitive market. That is that profits are zero. And when our profits on zero, what does that look like graphically? Well, it's where the average total cost is at its minimum. So that means ATC, average total cost, is at its minimum. That means that profits are zero. I'm going to denote profits as pi. So since profits are zero, the minimum average total cost will also have to be at 50 as well. So that is true. And the total cost is $100,000. Well, if profit equals total revenue minus total cost, and we know our total revenue is 100,000, and we know profits are zero, that means it must be true that total cost is 100,000. So the answer is all of the above as your answer. And there you go. So I hope that helped with that question. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so perfectly competitive firm is in short run equilibrium. Okay, so this is a little different than the long run. So pretty much we have to notice what they say here, that the firm decides to exit the industry. So in the short run, it appears that profits are negative in the short run. It says, but they'll still continue to produce, so they're not leaving yet. The current price is $3. What can we say about the current output levels? Well, one thing that you should probably know is that when price is greater than the average total cost, you leave the market immediately. But since they're not leaving the market immediately in the short run for this perfectly competitive firm, we have to see what other things are happening. So let's look at the first choice. The average total cost is less than $3. Well, if you looked at that on the graph and you had your average total cost here, you'd actually be making profit, which would be this area here. So that is not that choice. Next we have average variable cost is less than or equal to 3. An average variable cost pretty much is the amount of money that you're paying for your workers. So if you have this, it's less than or equal to 3. Then if you can't cover your labor, so this is wage times quantity of labor pretty much is a factor. If you can't cover your labor, then pretty much you have to shut down immediately. But since that they're staying in business, pretty much they can cover their costs. So since it is less than or equal to 3, the company is still in working in the short run for now. So that means that must be true, that they can cover their workers because they're currently staying in business. If they weren't staying in business, they would eat their fixed costs. So that's pretty much the answer choice. We don't even really need to look at the other one here, but because long run equilibrium, they might have to leave. So next, let's go to this one. Perfectly competitive firm is profit maximizing and currently operating at an average total cost of $12 and is producing 50,000 units if the market price is 14. So let's draw that. So I drew out the firm's graph here. And now it's asking, or it states that the average total cost is $12, so that would be below here, so that'd be about there, 12 bucks. So we know that when the average total cost is below the demand curve, we know that the firm will be making profits. So that would be this region here. They'd be making profits. So it's definitely C. But now we got to see if it's B as well. So the firm is in short run equilibrium. Let's take a look at that. So we know that temporarily that this will be true, that they'll be making profits. But since they're making profits, more firms will enter the perfectly competitive market and shift that equilibrium back in the long run to where profits are zero. So in the long run, profits are zero for a perfectly competitive firm. So that means right now it's not in long run. So that means it must be in short run because they're making profits as well. So the answer is D, both B and C. Okay, so now a monopoly is currently profit maximizing by selling 1,000 units of output at the price of 30. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so since we know if this weren't a monopoly that they would have to sell at this equilibrium price here, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but since it's a monopoly, it goes where its marginal revenue intersects the marginal cost curves, and then it goes up to where that intersects the demand curve, and that is the price. So you should know that already. So knowing that the actual profit maximization occurs here, that was given, what can be true? Well, that means they aren't producing as much of their supply, so they're selling here and charging a lot more. That markup, that's called markup. So now what's true, just looking graphically, where the marginal cost curve is the supply curve. So it's equal to 30, no, because that would be if it was not profit maximizing. Marginal cost is less than 30. That is true. Notice how the green curve is below the red point on the blue curve, which is the demand curve. So that is true. If it was greater than 30, that means the supply curve would be up here. So it is less than. Okay. Next one, we have a perfectly competitive firm. That's a monopolistic competitive firm, and the short run equilibrium. So those are the key. Short run equilibrium, monopolistic competitive. So I'm going to draw this out real quick. So I drew out the information here. So we have the blue is our demand curve, and our marginal revenue is shown there. And then we have our marginal cost curve in green, and I showed out the prices there. Now total cost is just price times quantity, so that's 100 units times the price, which would be at 450 then, since it intersects the marginal revenue and marginal cost curve. So now let's look at the choices here. So marginal cost is in the short run at $9 or $4.50. So if it were at $9, it would be here, but since it's a monopoly, they're going to produce along the marginal revenue curve. So the marginal cost will actually be at $4.50. So it's not A, and it is B. But let's look at the next part. The short run average total cost is $4.50. So if that were true, that means the average total cost would look a little something like that. And it says it's at $4.50. So let's look at that. So that would be true for the short run since it's intersecting at $4.50. The short run average total cost will be at $4.50. So that means our answer is D, both B and C. But now let's talk about the long run. So that was in short run. So now we're talking about long run. If this continues in a monopolistic competition, what will happen? Well, if they're making profit, because the monopoly is making profit when they're in the short run when that happens, what will happen? So if they're making profits, that means in the short run, these guys are making profits. In the long run, more firms will enter. More firms, I guess. So that kind of, when you're making money, more people want to come in and jump in on the competition, pretty much. So, and get some of that money. So it would just be B. But let's see. A firm will operate at minimum average total. Existing firms will exit, so it's not exit. And yeah, so it's just B. So now suppose potato chips are produced in a perfectly competitive, constant cost industry, perfectly competitive, long run equilibrium, and okay, suppose the availability of fat blocking diet drug now causes a permanent increase in demand for potato chips. So let's draw that out. Okay, so blue is demand, green is supply, and the industry is the market, so this is the market, so we're not looking at the firm, we're looking at the entire market in general. And it's saying that there's an increase in demand, so that's a shift to the right, so this will be D2. So what will happen? In the short run, industry equilibrium following this increase in demand will what? So the price of potatoes will be higher than normal. Okay, that is true. Because here's the price, here's the quantity. We were originally at equilibrium here, and now we moved up here, so the price has changed from there to there, so there was an increase. So that is true. The profits earned by the potato chip producers will be higher than they were originally. Well, since more people wanting to come in, or wanting the potato chips, more people are going to buy it, so the firms are going to each make profits, and the overall market will as well. And the quantity of potato chips will be higher than original. So originally we were at this Q, and now that P, and then we went to this P, so now we're going shifts this way, so our Q is also shifted to the right as our price increased as well. So that is also true, so the answer is all of the above. Now let's look in the long run. So that was short run. Now let's look at long run. So since this shift occurred, let's draw it out again. What will happen if a lot of people are making money in this perfectly competitive firm? More people have the opportunity to jump in and make profit, so that means more firms will enter the market, which will increase the supply curve and shift it to the right. So we'll call that S2. So then what happens? Where will the new equilibrium form? Well, we had it here, and now it'll form here, roughly around the same area. We don't know how far it'll shift, but we'll see. Actually, we might. So let's look at the choices here. So we have the price of potato chips will be higher than it was originally. That we're unsure about, actually. We will not know if it'll probably actually go back to the same price. So that's not true. So the profits earned by the producers will be higher than they were originally. No, because since more firms are entering the market, that means they're stealing away kind of that profit. So no. The quantity of potato chips will be higher. Okay, so this was our original Q, and now we're over here. So yes, we did increase in quantity, so that is true. So the answer is not none of the above, the answer is C. Okay, let's move on. Okay, I'll try to make this fast. So I drew out the graph for now. We're producing 4,000 units of output with total revenue of 200,000, so we know total revenue is price times quantity. And we use our information, so I'll solve for P and we get a price of 500, so I put that on the graph too. This is monopolistic competition, and it's in the long run. So what do we know about that? Well, that's the key right there. The long run equilibrium means that profits are zero for a monopolistic competitive firm. So what's the case where we have profit equals zero? We can take a look real quick. If we have profits are total revenue minus total costs, and total revenue is 200,000, and we want this to equal 0, that means total cost, which is X, has to be 200,000, so that would be answer C. Okay, moving on. Monopolistic competitive firm advertises. Advertisements, this is kind of a definition question. So say you're advertising for a Super Bowl ad. Super Bowl ad are like worth millions of dollars per 30 seconds or something. So that is a fixed cost. So that will increase if you choose to advertise. It's not a variable cost. Profits will increase. You're not sure if your advertising will be successful. And yeah, so it's a fixed cost rise. The flatter the slope of the total product curve, the what? So here's your total product curve. It increases as more workers come, and then if you have too many workers, you start to be less and less productive. That's the law of diminishing returns. This is quantity, workers, quantity of labor, and then output. So let's think about this. The larger the marginal product of labor, no, let's see, the smaller is the marginal product of labor. So this slope is getting flatter and flatter and flatter. That means you have less and less output, so that is true. Your marginal product, your product output gets smaller as the slope gets smaller. So now in long run equilibrium, key, profits, firms maximize their profits by doing marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Which firm would that be? That'd be every firm. In the long run, they all want to maximize their profits where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So that's everyone. Okay, so now we have marginal cost curve intersects what? So the marginal cost curve, it looks a little something like this. It's the supply curve. And it intersects what? Well, we could have, I'm just going to do them all in purple. We know we have our average total cost, and that's when profits are zero. We're usually at the minimum there. So average total cost is a choice here at the minimum. But what about average variable cost? That's also a choice. Oh, variable. But let's see, what was the other one they have here? Average fixed cost? Well, average fixed costs, they look more like this. They kind of like that. And that's not necessarily at the minimum. So it can't be fixed cost. So knowing that it can't be the fixed cost, that rules out A, that rules out, actually that rules out all of them but D. So, and here are the answers. So that's kind of a definition question as well, if you should know what the graphs look like. Now we have this one here. Which of the following are true about price discriminating monopolists? So price discriminating, think of it as airplane tickets. So if you buy your ticket super early in advance, you will get a very cheap ticket, but if you need to leave the next day, it'll be super expensive. So that's perfect price discriminating. So is it efficient? Yes, I can show that graphically. I'll do it real quick. Whoosh. So at every price they're charging on that demand curve, so there is no deadweight loss. It doesn't exist. So it is efficient. Next we have profits are maximized. That is also true. And consumer surplus is 0. So I guess going back to that graph, there is no surplus because you guys are not happy if you have to buy a plane ticket that costs, I don't know, $200 one way to get to the other side of the country, or say. So I think the answer down there, D, is all of the above. So that would be the answer. And then lastly, we have three-firm oligopoly. So that's kind of like 3 monopolies kind of working together. And if they successfully collude, meaning they work together, what will be true? Well, so we're not sure. So we're assuming that they're not price discriminating, and when they collude, how do they act? They act like a monopoly. So how would a monopoly act? So let's see, 3-firm oligopoly. So if there were less, they put less output so they can raise their prices, which means that there is deadweight loss, which means that they are not efficient. Not efficient. So if they act like a monopoly, they'll produce here, and then their deadweight loss is there. So that's not efficient. So let's see. Well, that would be at what price? That would be less than the efficient quantity. Yeah, they purposely produce less so they can make more money. Okay, so that was really long. Sorry if it took too long, but hope this helped in terms of going over practice problems and just kind of getting a feel for what types of questions could be asked on exams, and also going over concepts. This video was under the assumption that you kind of studied and you just need to practice, so I hope it helped.